Hey guys, welcome to Mystifying Miracles. I'm Kristen, and twice a week I do videos that are true stories, and they always contain a miracle or two or three or more. So if you like true stories that always end on a happy ending, well, at least the main idea of it, sometimes there's tragedies within the stories, but they do always contain at least, like I said, at least one miracle. So, sounds up your alley? Listen in and we'll get started with our story. Today's story is about a woman named Juliane Koepcke. She was born in 1954 in Lima, Peru. Her parents were zoologists and their names were Maria and Hans. When Juliane was about 14 years old, her parents established, it was called the Penguina Research Station, and that was located in the Amazon rainforest. And about the age of 14, Juliane started learning survival skills and just all the, nooks and crannies of the things you need to know about the Amazon rainforest or the jungle in general, since her parents worked there. However, it was the educational authorities, the story said, that did not agree with this, and they wanted Juliane to return back to school in Germany so that she could take her tests and her exams for the year. And her school, it was the German International School, and again, that was located in Lima. So on Christmas Eve, it was December 24th, 1971, Juliane and her mother boarded a Lanza Flight 508, and they were headed back to, get Juliane back there to take her exams. At this time, I imagine because of, Christmas time and the holidays, all the other flights were booked at the time, so they had to take this one. It was the only one available. It said this particular plane, the airline that it belonged to, didn't have that good of a reputation. So Juliane's father, he was not happy about this. He did not want them taking this plane because of that. But again, like I said, it was the only one available, and she had to get back to take those exams. So they had to book this one. So at the time, they're waiting for the plane. It was actually coming back later than scheduled. And you know how that is when your flights are delayed or you're just waiting because it was canceled and you're waiting for another one. This particular one, it said it was 7 hours late. So once it got there, Juliane and her mother, Maria, they were just tired and exhausted, and they were ready. They were like, all right, let's board this thing and get there. Like, we're tired of sitting around 7+ hours in the airport, Now, Maria, who was Juliane's mother, she was an anxious woman, so she hated flying. In fact, she always got sort of panicky when she boarded a plane, so to speak. But Juliane herself loved flying. She didn't care. She was like, this is fun. So that was kind of the mood getting onto the plane at the very beginning. They've boarded. They're at this point, they're up in the air flying. And Juliane remembers to this day, she remembers the plane flying into a very dark cloud. And it said about 10 minutes after that, Juliane, she knew something was just very, very off. And she just had that feeling, that something bad was maybe about to happen. And sure enough, no sooner than she was having those thoughts, all of a sudden the plane started having this just crazy turbulence. And I'm not talking about the normal turbulence. It was awful. It said the plane was just jumping up and down, basically. The luggage was flying out all over the place. Remember, it's Christmas Eve, so Juliane remembers Christmas gifts flying out of the bins and going all over the place. And she remembers seeing like Christmas cakes, that I guess that had been stored that people were taking to family or friends. They were also flying all over the place. So it was at this point like a very scary situation. And despite this, Juliane knew this was not good, but she wasn't too fearful right in that moment. She was just like, oh my goodness. But she did still feel that something was off. So she peered out the window again when all this was happening, and she saw lightning, and it was very close to the plane, and it was quite a bit of it striking down. So that's when she got scared, very scared at that point when she saw that. And she said, that passengers were screaming and sobbing and yelling and crying and just terrified. I can't imagine being in that moment. And so during all this, Juliane and her mom, Maria, they started to hold hands, and they were holding hands tight for like 10 plus minutes as all this was going on, just hoping like, oh my gosh, what is going to happen? This is very strange. And when you can hear the screams of everybody else and crying, that just makes it 10 times worse, I'm sure, mentally, Well, Juliane's, still looking out at this point, and she remembers seeing a bright light, and it said she saw it on the outer left engine. And right after she saw that was when her mom, and they're still clasping hands, her mom looked over and said to her, quote, "That is the end. It's all over." Oh man, that would terrify me. I mean, I don't like flying personally, so I can just imagine myself in this position. Oh my gosh, poor thing. And it said that these were the last words that Juliane would ever hear her mom say ever again. So just right off the bat, this is just a terrifying story. So, right then the plane starts jumping up and down violently, even worse. And the lights go out. It's total darkness. So, and you can still hear the screams and crying of everybody. And then right after that, Juliane says the plane began to nosedive in total darkness. Oh my gosh. Like I said, I can't imagine. Terrifies me actually reading the story. In that darkness, again, all she could hear were the screams and the roaring of the engines and the plane starting to nosedive. And then she said immediately it was quiet. And Juliane, get this, guys, found herself in a free fall outside of the plane. So that's why it got quiet, because the plane had broken apart or starting to break apart. And now she's still strapped into her row of seats, falling from the sky outside of the plane. Oh my gosh. And I'm sure this is all happening so fast. She's just like, has no clue what's going on. She's falling again, still strapped into her row of seats. She's by herself. There's no other passengers with her in that row. Now, her mother had been next to her, but I don't know how that worked. Now thinking back on it, I don't know if that seat flew off the row or how many seats were in the row exactly, but it was just her at the time, free falling. And she remembers seeing the jungle spinning towards her as she got closer to the ground. And it was later found out, of course, that the plane actually was breaking apart about 2 miles above the ground. So she was high up, yes, but not as high up as we would probably assume without that information. And it's, probably why she ends up surviving. It was the next day when Juliane awoke in the jungle and her collarbone was broken. She had deep lacerations to her legs and some on her arms and whatnot. But other than that, she was okay, which is miraculous right there. I don't even know how she didn't have any head injuries or anything like that. But yeah, later it was discovered that she did have a ruptured knee ligament, but they didn't know it at the time because she was able to get up and walk, which you'll see as the story progresses. But yeah, so she had no idea of that. She just knew her collarbone was broken and of course all the deep cuts all over her body. When she awoke, again, she couldn't believe that she was alive, that she had made it. And she immediately began calling out for her mother. She wanted to know where her mom was. Was she near? Did she make it? where was she? And as she was walking about, as time, the few days that went on, she'd hear search planes occasionally over the jungle, but the jungle was just so thick and dense. It was hard to see down in there and vice versa, see up. So she could only hear them. And what she was wearing, all she had on was a sleeveless dress and sandals. And actually, she had lost one of her sandals when the plane broke apart and she fell. So one shoe and a sleeveless dress in the Amazon jungle. That's crazy. So what she would do, and she also had glasses, but those were lost as she fell. So what she would do with the one shoe she had, as you know, the rainforest has all kinds of beasts and snakes and things in it. So she would use that one shoe to kind of tap in front of her as she walked, like in the mud and on the ground, to feel for any snakes. She didn't want to end up stepping into one of those. That could be fatal. So, and remember, the good thing is she had some survival skills that she had learned because her parents were zoologists and had that research center. So she at least had that, thank goodness. Well, she eventually made it back and found the actual crash site where most of the crash had fallen into the jungle. And she ended up finding a bag of sweets, it said, but that was all she found. So she munched on that, and that was gone pretty fast. And so once the little bag of sweet candies were gone, she worried deeply about starvation. She didn't know how she was going to make it out there by herself. And you just got to imagine the weather. It rained every day. It was extremely high temperature, so it was hot, humid, sticky. And here you are with no food or water. Another reason I'd be terrified. It said on the fourth day, she heard a king vulture overhead nearby, and she knew right away what that meant. If those were by, that means she was near some deceased bodies from the crash. And she actually ended up finding one of the row of seats in the mud from the crash, and it had people still strapped into it. But when they had landed, I guess, head first, I mean. And so half of their bodies, or at least their heads, were into the ground, if that makes sense. And so when she saw it right off the bat, she was so worried that one of those passengers could have been her mother. I'm not sure if it was 2 or 3 people, but she was scared to death. So what she did, because she didn't want to touch them, she found a stick and she kind of poked around because she had to find out. She just had to know, was one of those passengers her mom? So the only woman in the row of seats, once she poked around with the stick, she found the lady had nail polish, and she knew right away, okay, good, that's not my mom, because her mom, Maria, never, ever wore nail polish, and she knew that. So she almost had a relief wash over her that, okay, that's not her. Shoo. Well, now it's day 10, and Juliane cannot stand very well because she hasn't had food, much water, and she's severely dehydrated, and she's still wounded. So she's really worrying, but she's still doing her best to walk around slowly but surely. She remembers finding a big, large river, and so she worked her way around the edge of it and kept going along. She says, looking back, that was the loneliest time. Just walking around that river, she barely has any energy to stand. She doesn't know if her mother made it, and she knows she's not going to make it much longer if she doesn't get some help. She said that was so lonely for her, and I can only try to put myself in her shoes. Try to think of just how desperate and lonely that must have really been. And so she's walking around, and that's when she sees up ahead a little ways a very large boat. And she immediately kind of adrenaline pops back into her, and she's like, oh gosh, maybe there's people. Maybe I can get help. And, she thought that, but she also thought, oh my goodness, am I hallucinating? That's a possibility. But nonetheless, she makes her way over to the boat. And once she got there, was able to touch it, see that it was real, the adrenaline just rushed even further in her body. And she's very, very excited. And it's almost like you get a pep of energy again, even though she was so weak before, because she thinks, okay, I might have a chance. And she says, right after she saw and touched the boat, up a little ways off to the side, there was like a little skinny little path, and it led to a hut. Just a little hut, simple structure, and it had like a palm leaf over it for a roof. She said next to it was a liter of gasoline, and she had a deep laceration on her right arm. So this will get a little squeamish for a second, okay, guys? But this is part of her story, okay? So her right arm, because it's, remember, the 10th day, and no nourishment in the jungle, those wounds haven't been treated. There were maggots. Ooh, gives me chills, in her right arm. So Juliane remembered that once they had a dog, it had the same infection. It had a deep cut with maggots in it. And what her father did is he poured kerosene in it. And the dog lived and healed, and she remembered that. So when she saw the gasoline can, she thought, aha, I need to pour that on my arm that has the maggots. Ooh, I hate maggots. That's disgusting. Anyway, so she slowly makes her way over to the little hut, and as you already know, she picks up the gasoline can and begins to pour it into her right arm. I'm just imagining it. She says the pain was horrific. And, well, you're pouring gasoline, 1. 2, it's got maggots. So what happens is, as she's pouring in the gasoline, the maggots are burrowing further into the wound and the skin to try to get away from the gasoline. Nerve endings, and they're trying to eat further deeper into her body. Pain was horrific, and but she, all in all, she was able to pull 30 maggots out of her right arm. And man, she's brave. But I guess you got to do what you got to do, right? You never know what you're going to do. Stranded in the wilderness, I guess, or the jungle. She pulls 30 of them out, and, she's exhausted at that point. She already was to begin with, but that pain and everything just, depleted the rest of her energy. So she spent the night in that hut. Now, the next morning, she awoke, and she heard men's voices outside. She got excited because those were people. She immediately went outside, and when the men saw her, they were confused because these were natives. And so they actually mistook her for some kind of water goddess, it said, which was a figure from local legend. She ended up introducing herself in Spanish and tried to tell her story, what had happened, the plane and everything. And they ended up giving her food, treating her wounds. And then the next day, they took a canoe. It was an 11-hour trip, it said, back to civilization. And from that point, she was flown to a hospital for further treatment. The day after she was saved, she was able to see her father. And he just said he had no words. He just embraced his daughter. He was so excited, thankful, and blessed that she was alive and okay. For many days after that, though, Juliane said her father was just frantic because now he was still looking for his wife, and he was doing everything in his power to search for her, to look news stories up and see if anything's come about that she was alive and saved, like his daughter. But unfortunately, on January 12th was when Maria, his wife and Juliane's mother, was found, her body. Now, later on, after the fact, it was found out that she actually survived the fall. like Juliane did. However, her wounds were way more extensive. She was strapped to the seat just like Juliane had been, and she was so badly injured that she just couldn't move. She couldn't get herself out of that. So it's such a sad story for her mom. And she lived for several days until she finally passed away. So that's kind of sad and unfortunate. It was a blessing and a miracle that Juliane survived this. Once she recovered, she returned to her parents' native Germany, and there she studied biology, and she graduated from Kiel University in 1980. She also ended up getting her doctorate a little later on. She got that in Munich. Then, after she got her doctorate, she went back to Peru and she researched mammalogy, which is like a study of bats. Currently, she's married and is a librarian at the Bavarian State Collection of Zoology in Munich. She does have an autobiography. I've never read it, but it sounds like it would be very interesting. And I'll post that in the description for anybody that might be interested. But her autobiography is called When I Fell from the Sky: How the Jungle Gave Me My Life Back. And that came out in 2011. So, guys, just an amazing story. Some squeamish parts in it, at least for me. But my goodness, I would say at least two miracles. A miracle that, she learned survival skills in the rainforest at an early age of 14 years old. And then, had she not done that, would she have made it in the jungle? I don't know. But amazingly, survived the fall. So another miracle, a miracle that those men, she found that hut and the men found her and treated her and took her back to civilization. So just a great story for her. Unfortunate, again, for her poor mom, but still a miraculous story and one that was just very interesting to me. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully not too squeamish about the maggots like I was. But I just thank you guys so much for listening, for watching, for commenting, and just remember to like and subscribe if you like the stories, and I will see you guys for the next one. Thank you so much.